Hello everyone, and welcome to this event by Behavioral Economics Greece. Behavioral Economics Greece is a group aimed at promoting behavioral economics to the people of Greece. We do many different events. We're aimed at all levels of knowledge. We're slowly growing. It's been about a year. Today, we're very happy and excited to have Melina Palmer with us. She is the CEO of the Brainy Business, doing behavioral economics consulting. She's also the host of the Brainy Business podcast. And she also teaches applied behavioral economics through the Texas A&M Human Behavioral Lab. She's gonna be talking to us today about her new book, What Your Customer Wants and Can't Tell You, which came out in May. Melina and I, when I first started my very early steps in the world of behavioral economics, she was there for me. She helped me, with my career decisions. She was always supporting me, and I'm very excited and very humble for her to be here with us today. So, without further ado, let's hear from her.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the introduction. I'm very excited to be here with everyone who is here live and who are going to watch after, and to be able to talk about one of my very favorite things, which is just behavioral economics in all of its forms. And today I'll be just walking a little bit through my book and what is there in What Your Customer Wants and Can't Tell You. I'm going to go ahead and set this up. So this should be, am I the main screen now? Is that how we're seeing that? Cool. All right. So yeah, my book is What Your Customer Wants and Can't Tell You, and is all about applying behavioral economics in business. And so, for those who are here live, I do like to include some chat box fun as we go. So be prepared for that. So for the people who are newer to behavioral economics, I always like to start with, what it is. And I like to say that if traditional economics and psychology had this adorable baby, we would have behavioral economics. And what a weird, green line that is showing up on there. Do you see that on my slides? How strange. I don't know what that is, if that's showing up for you or how to get rid of it, but we'll just ignore it and all will be well. So the reason that the field came about is because traditional economics assumes that logical people are making rational choices in everything that they do. And that's just really not the world that we live in. We have a plan to exercise and eat right, and then we sit on the couch watching Netflix and eating Cheetos all night long, or whatever that is, right? So even though we know what we should do, we don't always do those things, or even what we want to do. And so what happened, the reason this was a problem, is that traditional economics was built on models that assume those logical decision-making processes. And so the models just didn't accurately predict behavior of what people actually do. And so over time, you had economists and psychologists and neuroscientists and from other fields either, working together or entering into one another's fields to try and find if there were these themes within the brain that could be used to more accurately predict what people will do. And Thankfully, there are many, many, many of them, and that is how the field of behavioral economics was born. So why does this matter for anyone in business? In any business or industry, one big piece being at the end of 2019, Bloomberg did it always comes out with the top jobs of the next decade, of which for the decade that we are in, behavioral scientist was number one on the list. And so for one, just knowing even above data analyst, that people are really looking at the behavioral sciences as something that's going to be important around the world. And there has been a lot of traction that's growing there. All the big companies either already have an internal behavioral science teams. In some, they call these a nudge unit, or perhaps they have a chief behavioral officer. Procter and Gamble has an internal department that's like an agency within P&G that does behavioral science consulting for all the brands of Procter and Gamble, or these companies are working with consultants like myself to be able to incorporate this understanding of the brain and decision-making into everything that they're doing. So for any companies, businesses, consultants, whatever it is that you do, anyone who is not yet on this train, or if you're not going to be incorporating behavioral economics into your business, you will be left behind. And so it's really important to consider making it easier for people to choose you, to enjoy your products, your services. And the good thing is it doesn't have to be super difficult. One such example coming from Netflix. And while these days we're pretty used to seeing all sorts of artwork for different shows, way back, companies used to just accept whatever the production company sent along to them. And Netflix instead decided to start doing some simple A/B tests to see if there was any difference in the imagery that they used and the likelihood of people to watch. And what they found is with the right image, they could see as much as a 30% increase in the likelihood to watch, as well as the likelihood to stay within the Netflix platform, which of course is a big goal for them. So while these images all look fairly similar, same characters, same stuff, same font, the little bit of a difference can make a huge difference when you look at adoption. Another great example is something we're all very familiar with, I'm sure, this buy now button when you go to shop at Amazon. What you might not know is that back in 1999, Amazon actually patented one-click buying. So all their competitors had to have an extra click in the buying process. That's, Barnes and Noble, anywhere else, you have to say, are you sure? Do you really want this? Are you ready? Something like that. That's a little bit of friction, or as we say, sludge, within the process that was forced upon them because of Amazon having this ability to just have a single click. And that's a patent they defended, spending millions and millions of dollars on over the years. And if you don't just believe that Amazon had some knowledge of that value, Steve Jobs paid $1 million to Amazon to be able to have one-click buying in iTunes. And so when you think about a single click being valued at $1 million, and all the times within any of your own work or conversations, where you might say, well, it's just one more form, one more click, one more page, one more person to talk to, one more thing to read, one more time to explain who you are, whatever it is. If every single one of those one mores cost $1 million, would you be able to reduce some of them and make it an easier process for people to adopt and then do business with you? Often what we see is that people put a lot of things into their processes that are for them sometime in the future and not considering the benefit of the user. So I'm asking a question now, I might as well get all the information I possibly can, and then someday I might use it. Let's not do that anymore. Make it as simple as possible, make it easy for people to do the thing they're trying to do right now. So I am going to talk about some of those concepts today of the brain. So you have some ways to be applying them. Really quickly, first, I always like to talk about how the brain works. And so if you were to think of your brain as a person riding an elephant, you have your logical, conscious rider that has a plan, it knows where it wants to go. It can see out onto the horizon, the best way to get there. Unfortunately, it doesn't speak the same language as the elephant. So you can't logic it into going where you want to go. And if it decides that it wants to run in a direction that's, the other way, or it wants to sit down for a while, you can't push or pull that 6-ton animal to go where you want it to go. You're kind of at the mercy of that elephant. And so when you think about this, we feel like when we're creating programs and processes and things for customers, that we're writers communicating with other writers. But if you're not properly motivating that elephant and understanding what it is about, you are very likely set up to fail. And that's where, behavioral sciences allows us to understand the rules that the elephant uses to make decisions. So when you think about what your brain does, anything that would come to mind if you just take a moment and say, what does my brain do? That is all in your conscious cognitive processing. When you're aware of the act of thinking, when you're thinking about thinking, that's that cognitive conscious processing space. I just talked about the subconscious or non-conscious, and within the behavioral sciences, you'll hear these as system 1 and system 2. I like to talk about conscious and subconscious because it's just easier for people to remember. So you have a subconscious, it's there, but we don't always like to think about how much it's actually doing. So now is one of our first chat box opportunities for those who are here. So what percentage of the brain's processing do you think is subconscious? Would we say 25, 50, 75%? Any other numbers? Let's pop them up in the chat box. And I know we have some people who have, some level of awareness here. So it's okay if you know, but. So I see a 75 and 80, and we got another 75, another 75, lots of 75s. And we do have a 98 that was on there. And so the highest that I've seen anyone claim on this, knowing there's a lot we still don't know about the brain, so it's not an exact number. The highest I've seen puts this at 99.999%. Yikes. So for any lazy brains that didn't want to do that math, that could mean as little as only 0.001% of what we do every day is done on a conscious level. Even if it is still in that 80-20 space, and most agree that it's in that 90-95% at least, that's still a lot that is happening within that subconscious elephant, and why it's so super important that we communicate with it instead of just trying to rationalize with that logical writer. So a little bit about how it works. It's not a left brain, right brain thing. I like to think about it as like a gatekeeper or a receptionist when you're trying to get a meeting with a busy executive. So that subconscious brain is constantly scanning the world around for things it already knows how to do, what it has a rule for. And we'll say, I know how to do this. I know how to do this. I got that. Normal. And then every so often it can't do something. It doesn't have a rule in place. It'll kind of, like flag and say, hey, conscious brain, you're up. Go handle this thing for us now. And so you need to get through that filter, or sometimes you want to work with that filter, which is why it's important to know the problem you're solving, which I'll talk about here in just a minute. And so, just how much is going on through the elephant before we get to the writer. If you think about your brain like a computer, a comparison people like to make often, the elephant can do about 11 million bits per second in that subconscious processing, compared to the writer, which can do about 40. Again, not a great ratio here. This is getting at that, 99%. And so even if it was 40,000, again, it's not a great ratio. And we don't get to just decide, this thing I'm working on now is really important. I need an extra 100 bits or something. You have to relegate things and have it so the subconscious is making decisions as you go. There are many, 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 many concepts that the subconscious brain is using as it is making these decisions. And don't worry, I'm not going to try to talk about all of these today. Many of them do have episodes of the Brainy Business podcast. I also have 16 that I've picked that are concepts that are, I think, most important for businesses that are featured within my book. And I'm going to talk about a couple of those with you here today. And when we talk about this process of applying behavioral economics into business, and that's really a big piece of what the book is about, I like to introduce and talk about behavioral baking. So if you decided you wanted to open a bakery, like this is your new lot in life, this is what you're going to do, but you've never actually baked anything in your whole life, what would you need to do first? You probably want to know what the basic ingredients are and what they do. Flour, sugar, butter, and eggs can be combined in all sorts of different ways to make tons of different things. And so if you don't know in advance if you're wanting to make cake or cupcakes or cookies or macarons or pizza dough or whatever, you will very much end up with a mess at the end. So you need to know what you're going to be putting in there. You need to know what the ingredients do, what you're trying to create before you get started. And you're probably going to follow some recipes really early on. You're not just going to start, again, throwing things into a bowl and hoping it's delicious on the other side. You will maybe even get something like a box cake mix at the very, very beginning to help you with the simplest possible process in going along the way of your baking journey. You will likely still have lots of fails as you go, but it's not something where you would say, oh, I tried baking once and it didn't work. Baking's not real, right? That's a ridiculous thing to say. No one would ever say that. You'd say, oh, my cake was dense or liquidy in the middle. I wonder why. And next time I'm going to do this other thing, or I'm going to try this. And so it's the same as we think about applying behavioral economics. The concepts are like your ingredients. And so you want to know on their own what each of them does. You don't want to end up with, 3 cups of sugar and a tablespoon of flour in your cake. That's going to be really messed up. So you want to know what it is that each of those concepts do individually. And then as you have a recipe to follow, as you think about going to apply them. And this is kind of the basics of some of the recipe that's in the book. In part 3, it kind of walks you through how you can start combining those concepts to start applying them. And so the questions and things that I ask there as you go include, what problem are you solving? What's the most important thing for people to do? What's keeping them from doing that? How can you showcase your best choice? Where can you nudge them? How can you make it easy? And what your first test is going to be and how to think about testing. We can't get through all of these today, but we will go ahead and talk about a few of them, starting with the biggest mistake I see businesses make all around the world, whether they're thinking about applying behavioral economics or just working on projects, is not understanding the problem they're trying to solve. It's really easy to find the right answer to the wrong question, and people invest a lot of time in solving what comes up as feels like the right problem. And when we talk about this and spending time thinking about the problem, I like to talk about Einstein, who was reportedly asked if he only had 1 hour to save the world, how would he spend that hour? Of which he said he would spend 55 minutes understanding the problem and 5 minutes solving it. So Einstein arguably was a pretty smart guy, right? We can all pretty well agree that that is something we know about him. If he would be devoting 55 minutes to understanding the problem, I want you to think about your last project you worked on at work, how much of your respective hour did you spend thinking about the problem before you just jumped into problem solving mode? Where you said, oh, we need more customers, or people don't like this version, or the website's not working, we need to add a new page, or our prices are too high, let's work on reducing them, whatever, right? Did you even spend 5 minutes of your respective hour? And depending on the size of your business, you might spend, a 1 hour meeting talking about the problem, and then spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours and time on solving that problem, where you might be making Band-Aids for a bacterial infection, right? So totally a waste of time. It's not going to solve the problem that you have at hand. So again, think about what your ratio is and how you can be adding more time into understanding the problem that you're trying to solve. The way I do this with businesses is I take them through a process of question storming, which is inspired by the Right Question Institute's question formulation technique, but essentially is helping to really understand the problem that you're working on. And one example I love to always share in this is that of the literary. So the literary, if I was to tell you, starting tomorrow, your new job, all you can do, and until you solve this, until you're done, you can't do any other work. Your new job is that you have to get every single person in the world to properly throw away and sort their trash every single time. Do you feel like you are doomed and your children and children's children are also going to be trying to work on this problem, because change is hard and people have been trying this for decades and it doesn't work, right? People don't know what they're supposed to do. They don't recycle. It just is hard, right? So the literary, instead of kind of getting stuck in that problem, looked at things a little bit of a different way, and understood the problem differently, and looked at how they could work with the brain instead of what we all would do. So let's say, this is your new job. And even though you say, man, it hasn't worked, but what's the thing that you would do? Like, what do you think the problem is? It's likely people just don't understand what can be composted and what is recyclable. We need to educate them, or we need to show them more pictures of turtles with straws in their noses, or talk about how big Garbage Island is, or whatever it is to get them moving. We need to explain this so they can be as passionate as we are and move forward. The literary instead looked at a way of turning litter into lottery tickets. So stepping outside of that logical argument and looking for something that motivates people already, which is a possibility to win some money. And they tested in movie theaters in Sweden. And what they did was just say, hey, if you throw away and properly sort your stuff, for each piece of trash, you get a lottery ticket. And in that case, the prize was only 5,000 euro, which is still arguably like good amount, right? I wouldn't be upset if I threw away a popcorn tub and got 5,000 euro. So it was motivating enough for people. And if it's been a while since you've been to the movies, it's a pretty gross and disgusting place where people love to just leave their junk behind because someone else will take care of it, right? And so what they did, they tested in these 4 theaters across an entire month, full 30 days. And they had 100% compliance. Every single person, every single time, was able to properly sort and throw things away without having to ask, is this recycling or not? They knew what to do. They were able to do it. And when they were properly motivated, they took the action. And so change doesn't have to be hard when you are understanding the behavior you're actually trying to change, and look for ways to motivate people working with that elephant. And so the literary has been working, and they've created these smart garbage cans and are working with different municipalities to where it could be part of, you could win millions if you properly throw something away. So instead of walking down the street now and you see a bottle and think, ugh, people are so gross, I'm not like that. But then you walk past it, you might walk by and see the bottle and go, hey, I could win $1 million. I'm going to throw that away. I'm going to take a moment to do something. And in that same example, they saw in the movie theaters, people running through the aisles, trying to find if anyone left trash behind that they could throw away, women rifling through their bags, trying to see if they had old gum wrappers or anything else, because it was one ticket per piece of trash that you threw away. So understanding that you can motivate in a different way and what the problem is critical. And that is done through reframing that problem. You'll notice here that on the slides, there are sometimes numbers like this, which are just corresponding to episodes of the podcast. I won't call attention to it again, but like there's an entire episode about framing in episode 16. So you can make note if you want to check those out. Framing is essentially looking at how you say something, and that matters more than what specifically you're saying. We've got another chat box moment here, which is another example to say you're going to the store, you're going to buy ground beef. And when you're going there are two different stacks, virtually identical, but one is labeled as 90% fat-free, and the ones next to it as 10% fat. And when you see them that way, which one do you want to buy? Which one feels more appealing to you? And go with the first, your kind of gut reaction there. We got a 90%, 90%. One of our attendees, I believe that was our 98% person from the beginning too, for the brain subconsciousing stuff. Yeah. So 90. I've given this presentation to hundreds of people around the world, and overwhelmingly people agree that 90% fat-free sounds better. Now, logically, you probably know they are exactly the same thing. So why does it feel different? The point is, when our brain hears that information, how it is said is different for us, right? And so what you want to look for in your own business is, where are you maybe talking about things in 10% fat terms? You might have a really great product or service, and it's just the way you're presenting it that's making it so people aren't wanting to buy in. So, where can you flip the frame on something you're saying is 10% fat and find the 90% fat-free version of what you could say? And even better, is there a spot where your entire industry is talking in 10% fat, and you can be the one person that's saying 90% fat-free? Even though you're just saying kind of the reverse of the same thing, people will be more naturally likely to choose you when you're appealing to that subconscious and the way it likes to make a decision. One example I have of this is a financial institution I was doing a project for several years ago, who had a rewards checking account they were super excited to go and promote. And they had their plan for all their billboards, which were going to say, you can earn 1.26% APY for up to $25,000 in balances. Ta-da! Like driving down the freeway, this is the billboard. How many people go, ooh, right? It's more like, wow, that was a lot of words, right? My subconscious has no interest in that. Even if you understand the math, it doesn't really mean much to you. So thankfully, I was able to get them to reframe this messaging with their existing media buy. And instead we said, did your checking account pay you $315 last year? This is the 1.26% times 25,000 gets you 315. But this is a question that most people can very quickly say yes, or more likely, no, it didn't. And hey, who's talking about that? What was that? Right? I want to learn more. I am now curious. And in this case, this financial institution enjoyed a 60% increase in month-over-month account openings. Again, with the same media buy they already had planned, just by reframing the way that we talked about it, made it so it was more appealing for people, and they understood and wanted to take an action. So our next piece is understanding what you want people to do and how you can make that very appealing to them. So
Melina,
we humans are
a
herding. Yes. I know there was a plan to do questions at the end, but I'm happy to go ahead and address. What was the question?
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear that. So you were saying that the 90% is the best one?
In this, yeah, it's that most people, when they hear, do you want 90% fat free or 10% fat? Most people think 90% fat free sounds more appealing and would rather have that.
Because here in the Netherlands, what you see a lot is, for instance, yogurt, dairies, they all have the thing like 0% fat, only 5% fat. So they're not doing it right.
Right. Yeah. Yes. And this has even been shown. So this is a little bit more of a like sensitive sounding type of example these days, kind of hopefully more on the post side of pandemic life. But, for doctors, when they're told that something has an 85% success rate versus a 15% mortality rate, they're more or less likely to recommend. Like when you're told 85% success rate, you think, hey, cool, that's great. 15% mortality, you go, that sounds really, really bad. And on the same way for patients, whether they want to accept a possible treatment. And it's when you hear 85%, you don't even necessarily think about what the other side means. That subconscious, those 11 million bits, it's processing super, super fast and saying, oh, that sounds good. Okay, yeah, that's great. That's good. So you want to make sure that what you're putting out there is something that is motivating. And like you said, only 5% fat is definitely not as good as 95% fat-free on your yogurt. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. So we humans are a herding species, just like sheep and cows and guppies, that we want to be a part of the herd. It makes us feel safe and helps us to be protected. And so when we feel like we're out on the fringe, it can be really scary and difficult. And when we don't know, when we're in like unfamiliar territory, so you're buying a product that you've never bought before or in an industry where you haven't before, and you feel really unsure, you're more likely to look to others for advice. And this is where things like social proof are very, very important. It may feel like we don't need to put our star ratings and things like that out because people can figure that out on their own, or testimonials, that's not as important. One even being labeling something as the most popular or of the best value seems silly, right? Like, I don't need to tell someone something's the best value. They should be able to figure that out themselves, but they won't. And with something like most popular, there was a study that was done on restaurant menus in China. And when they labeled those things that were most popular as most popular, it increased the likelihood that they would be chosen by as much as 20% per item. And I think the least was 13%. And so if adding these two words, most popular, could make it so your most popular item is 20% more likely to be chosen by people, why would you not do that? One thing you do need to make sure, when we're talking about problem we're solving, aligning your business, is make sure it's something that's also very profitable and valuable for you, that you're putting your eggs in that basket to be promoting. But you want to make sure that your most popular thing, the thing that you're promoting that's easiest for people to choose that you are creating, is also, a good choice for your business. But then when you can show people like me did this, that's another, thing that Amazon really pioneered. We're all used to it now. But that was a really novel thing many years ago, to say people like you like these books. If you like this, you'll probably like that. Those sorts of recommendations are really, really valuable for getting people to make a choice, and testimonials and things as well, because of being that herding species. So this next concept is one called priming, in that something that happens just before we make a decision is impactful on the choices that we make. An example I really like here is where you have someone who was going to be participating in a research study. Along the way, they happened to bump into someone who had a bunch of stuff in their hands. They dropped all these papers and said, "Oh my gosh, can you hold this for just a second while I pick these up?" Half the time, they were handed an iced drink, the other half a hot drink to hold just for a few seconds while that person picked up their stuff. And as far as they knew, this person had nothing to do with the test they were about to be a part of. But then they went in and basically had to like read a paragraph about people and then rate their personality. And those who held the iced coffee were more likely to rate the person they read about as being cold, distant, and difficult compared to those who held the hot coffee. We also have instances of different words making it so when you were primed by doing a word search looking for things like elderly and bingo, people walked slower out of the room. And when you were in a room that had a backpack in sight versus a briefcase, that you were more cooperative with the teams that you were working on. The important thing to know here is that our brains make very literal association with the things around us, and something that we don't think should have any impact on the choice we're going to make, in 2 minutes or 30 seconds from now or 2 seconds from now can be impactful. And where people say, oh, I don't ever notice Facebook ads, they have no impact on me, I don't pay attention to commercials. They're wrong. Their subconscious is paying attention to that, and it could be impacting their behavior, even if they don't realize it. So you want to have a real awareness of word choice, of images, priming. Also, it includes all of the senses. So smell. At a gas station where they were pumping, the scent of coffee increased the sales of coffee by 300% when they had the scent of coffee out at the pumps, right? So there are many impacts that priming can have on buying decisions. And so as we keep going here, we're getting close to our, question and answer period. I have just a couple more concepts. Is when you know something's the best choice, how to showcase it. And we've got another fun chat box moment here, and no Googling. I'm intentionally asking questions that I don't think you know the answers to. So do you think there are more or less than 100,000 penguins in Antarctica? And go ahead and put it in the chat box. More or less than 100,000 penguins. More. So we have a sea of more so far. And so now I need you to claim, give me a number. You think it's more than 100,000, or if you do think it's less, put a number out there, name and claim it. Give me something. Fair enough. If you read the book, you can't answer. Do you remember the exact number of penguins too?
No, sorry.
No, that's great. So anybody else? I will not move forward until we get a couple people claiming a number. Pick something. Okay, thank you. We got 500,000. I like this. A million. Oof. So we have a 300,000. We have another million as a guess in here. Thank you for playing along with me. In actuality, there are about 12 million penguins in Antarctica. Oh, and there was a really great surprise face. That's fun. All right, so we'll try again, right? We'll do one more. So are there more or less than 25 million polar bears in the world? Yeah, less. I usually get at least one less with a sad face, because that's no good. So what's our number? How many do you think? We're saying less than 25 million. How many polar bears do we think are there? I see a 10 million. A 10,000 and a 1,000, 100,000. So I guess another million. Okay, we have some some very different than what I usually see on this, that we have a few that are in the low and pessimistic end, that you can be thankful to know that there are about 26,000 polar bears, which is still nowhere near enough polar bears. But for those that are saying 1 million or 100,000, that typically I get numbers that are high like that. And we would say, what happened? And specifically, we can look at the penguin example, right? Even where people were like, ooh, 1 million, maybe, like it feels like there are a lot, but I don't know, right? Like, why did it feel so uncomfortable? Like, and then you hear it's 12 million, you go, well, I mean, I should have known that. I mean, penguins are small. There are so many of them. Like, why didn't I know that was the thing? And what you may or may not have noticed, you likely did, but I asked with penguins if there were more or less than 100,000. And then I said 25 million on polar bears. If it was my goal to get you close to the number, I would have asked you a different question and set a different anchor, right? So if I would have asked if there were more or less than 25 million penguins in Antarctica, do you think you would have been closer to 12? Or if I had said if there were more or less than 15 or 10, right? How close would you have gotten versus 100,000? Or if I had said if there were more or less than 1 billion penguins, how close would you have gotten? You might have been in the hundreds of millions, right? And so knowing that those numbers are very impactful on our brain, and anchoring can be more than just numbers. But one of my favorite examples here is of Snickers bars that they had ads in the grocery store, end cap displays, half said Snickers bars buy them for your freezer. The other said Snickers bars buy 18 for your freezer, which we can all probably agree is a lot of Snickers bars and more than what most people buy. And so if you were creating these ads, you would feel probably pretty uncomfortable putting that out there. This is a herding thing too, right? Say, it's an arbitrary number. I don't want to have to defend it. And, them is unlimited and people could get 100 Snickers if they wanted, blah, blah, blah. And it probably doesn't make that big of a difference. But actually, not surprisingly, since it's presented here, it does make a big difference. In fact, a 38% increase in sales when it had the number 18 instead of the word them. And this is because of the anchor that is priming you in this decision. Whereas you go down, the aisle, them being like a fancy word for zero, you go well, maybe I'll get 2, right? Whereas 18, you think, oh, 18, way better than everybody else. I don't need 18 Snickers. I'll just get 6, right? So the number had an impact on us. There's also a slight difference in the way that there's a question behind these statements, and it's framed slightly differently based on the wording that's there. In the case of buy them for your freezer, you're saying, would you like some Snickers? Do you want some? The question on 18 is more of an implied sale, and it's how many do you want to buy? And that hits the brain a little bit differently. So I know we did a little bit on questions, or like one question. So I'm going to talk for just a couple more minutes and then we'll go into the rest of questions. So relativity being something of context, helping us to make a decision, right? When we see this fish in a bowl, it's hard to know if it has a really good life until we see another fish next to it. And we say, oh, yikes, like things are good in the big bowl, right? We need context to make good decisions and to value things. So this is a surprisingly difficult choice for people to make, where you have a 3-star restaurant very close to you, a 5-star restaurant that's far away. Then it's like, is it worth traveling to get the extra stars? What's good? Assuming you have the money to pay for both, right? So adding in a different choice can help someone make a decision. So another chat box moment here before we wrap up. What do you think most people choose in this option? Which restaurant do people pick? 3, 4, or 5 stars when these are our choices? So we have a couple people saying 4. And so Maria and Paris are right. It's 5. The 5-star restaurant, when it's a little bit closer than the 4-star restaurant, we can value that the good eating experience over the distance to travel, and it makes that look better. What about in this scenario? Which one do you think people are more likely to choose when there's a 2-star restaurant between the 3 and the 5-star? Yep. All right. Overwhelmingly, people were right. It's the 3-star restaurant. And it's important to note that even though they're all there, if you were to show all 4, it's another difficult decision. So curating the way that you showcase information based on the decision you want people to buy is, or the choice you want someone to make, is really important. And so that's looking for things that where you can be nudging them as you go. One big problem people make is they try to go from like step 1 to 1,000 on everything. And they don't think about all these little micro decision points along the way. The average person makes 35,000 decisions a day. And if you can look for nudgeable moments within there, you will be much better off. An example being, if you were doing something with direct mail and you have lots of things in a campaign, let's say, and direct mail is just one of them, you'd say, yeah, we're going to send the postcard and then we'll see if people bought or not. But there are lots of little choices in there that matter. You know, you need them to notice the postcard, to read it, to flip it over, be interested enough to not throw it away, to then visit your website, read your homepage, click on the product page, look to the pricing page, put it in their cart, buy. And then if they have that extra moment of friction because it's not Amazon where they have to say, are you sure? Do you really want to buy this? Right? Like you have all these moments where you could be nudging them, either like bumpers if you're bowling to keep them going down the right path, or where they'll get distracted by Instagram and say they're going to come back later. Last example here is one of opportunistic insurance fraud, and which is if you are going to be getting new car insurance, your 16-year-old son is going to be the driver, but you decide to say it's you so that the insurance is a little bit lower. And in the UK, this was a £1 billion problem every single year of people doing those little kind of tiny lies in the moment. And it seems like there's not really much to do, right? You just sort of accept. And that's what the industry did for a long time. But after 18 different interventions were tested, all of which had a positive impact, some, 7% or something like that. One of the things they tested used priming in the CAPTCHA and proving you're not a robot. And the word people had to type was honesty, which might not think much of it, but it reduced the fraud by about half, which when we remember it's a £1 billion issue, that's a $500 million benefit from just the word that comes up in the CAPTCHA. And so that priming was very impactful. Last note being, this was all about testing, right? So if they had just done something that had a 10% success rate and they said, hey, like, great, which is good, they reduced $100 million in fraud. That's not bad. But they could have been missing out on something that would have been even more impactful when they knew the behavior they wanted to test. So as you do your own behavioral baking, my tips on experiments are to keep it small, be thoughtful about what it is that you're testing, and make sure that you're testing often. And when you do have something that's got a lot of money on the line or really impactful for your business, use a research partner. You probably can make all the birthday cakes in the world as you start baking, but when it's the wedding, right? Wedding tomorrow, you're hiring someone to make those wedding cakes because you don't want to be doing that, because it's, if you mess it up, you really mess it up. This is just a little summary of the concepts we talked about and the episodes of the podcast that they are tied to. So, framing, herding and social proof, priming, anchoring and adjustment, relativity and nudges. Each of these also has a chapter in my book, What Your Customer Wants and Can't Tell You. And I think I went a little bit further than what we talked about. So I want to make sure we have at least like time for one question. And I don't have a hard stop if the rest of the world doesn't. So. Yeah, and then that's the book. So, ta-da!
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Hi, Melina. First of all, thanks for this. It's been really nice. I'm probably gonna buy your book just like right now.
Oh, thanks.
So thanks for that. No, I just have a question. Regarding the littering experiment with the cinema, because I've dabbled in the question myself, and I'm just wondering, wouldn't just be like giving people incentives to turn in trash, like in a more of a household environment, wouldn't it bring like unintended consequences, as in people getting trash that it's not like their own, or just littering more in order to get more
So
lottery
in the
tickets, for
case,
example?
yeah, in the case of Literary, they spent a lot of time creating, AI and machine learning smart garbage cans. And so you set up an app on your phone to be eligible. And then when you go and throw stuff away, so if you put a bottle in the trash, it will say, hey, thanks for trying, Melina, but that's not, that doesn't count. You don't get an entry this time. In the future, that's recycling. And so please remember and continue to, take care of our planet or whatever. If you try to throw away a rock or leaves or something, it'll say, nice try, that's something that belongs in nature. That's not garbage, nothing for you, right? You don't get the lottery tickets. And so it's able to scan and know if you threw away a piece of pizza or a plate or, a paper plate or a piece of paper or a rock, right? It knows, and then is auto generating stuff. And that's where, there's a lot of work that went into making that something that works properly. But it's to prevent people from being able to game the system that way.
Oh, okay, yeah. And what about just, I don't know, making extra trash in order to recycle it, sort of like the Cobra example in India?
Yeah, I think in the world of, I guess you could rip paper into smaller bits of paper to get more entries, but I don't know that they have experienced that sort of a problem in that, you're still throwing away the full item. And if you, make your rip the packaging into and make sure it's two separate pieces when you throw it away. In a world of a lottery, your chances of winning are so bad anyway, it doesn't really matter. And so it doesn't impact, as long as it all ends up in the trash. I don't know that it's a concern as much as, breeding cobras that you can then turn in for money.
Okay.
Yeah, that's something that you are actually able to create something new. That I don't think, as far as I know, I think that it has the same issue with incentives that can be seen.
Okay, sure. Perfect. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. And a note there, if somebody wants to write a question in the comments, I'm happy to read from there.
Melina, so
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions actually. So I'll start with my first one. As far as your personal favorite chapter to write in the book. I know it's a tough question, but yeah, we're a tough crowd. So.
Yeah. I would say that my favorite part of the book would be so part 4 is only 8 pages. And so I feel like that counts as a chapter, right? And so the way the book is part 1 is important brain stuff and how your brain works. Part 2 is those 16 concepts. Part 3 is ways to combine them. And then part 4 is called Don't Get Stuck. And so it's talking about all the stuff that's happening in our brains where we have optimism bias and we tend to bike shed or fall victim to things like time discounting and planning fallacy. And so for all the time, so now it's Saturday, you're listening to this and going, oh my gosh, that was amazing. I can't wait to buy Melina's book on Monday and start reading all of this and implementing everything. Then Monday comes and you get kind of sucked into the norm of what you've been doing. And you never end up doing the thing. And so the tips to not wait till Monday, do the thing now, take that action, do something, even a little thing to show your brain why this is important. So you actually use what you learned at that conference or, whatever it happens to be. I think that those 8 pages are so important for people to actually go start implementing what they learn, that would be, I think the most important part that is missing in a lot of books that I made sure was there. So in the writing process, if I faced any obstacles, I would say that, writing a book is not an easy thing. And there's also a reframing of saying the, like, I can do that, and I have this opportunity versus like, oh God, I have to go write today. Right. So helping yourself with some of those pieces, of which the publisher just gave a green light on my second book last week. And I'm starting that now. And also sort of like, oh God, why did I decide to do this again? Right. Now that I'm actually writing it. But the timeline from where the publisher approved the book and said, like, yeah, this is the direction we want to go. Because we didn't know if my first book was going to be specific about something like pricing strategy or more generic, like this one was. So that was the end of May 2020 that they said, like, yes, and let's do the general one first. And my full manuscript was due at the end of August. So like that's 3 months to write the book, of which I had, lots of podcast episodes and things to go off of and courses I teach and things like that. But just kind of forcing through the time to get it done. It was I have culling down and getting rid of stuff so that it fits within the word count, I think is a harder thing for me. But what I would say for anybody is, schedule yourself that you have to do, like they say, an hour a day or 3 hours a day or whatever. If writing a book is really important to you, there are a few tools that I use. Trello. If you already use Trello, I have a board when I'm working on a book where I'm able to, if I see an article or hear somebody mention a conversation or a post on LinkedIn that I think could be useful when I'm in writing mode, I can go save it there. Or if I have a thought, I can put it on that board based on the various chapters where they're going to go. I also use something called Stormboard, which is virtual Post-it notes, and being able to like shuffle around and say like, okay, this is going to go in this chapter and this thought can come into that too. And, shuffling things around, and you can change the colors of them and things to make them be more like it's grayed out when I've done something with it, things like that. But I think for anybody, just like writing the crappy first draft is the hardest part. Like just getting stuff out of your head and kind of forcing yourself through it is the most difficult. And know that it's okay if the first draft isn't great. Don't get too hung up on specific words and things like that.
So another Melina has a question.
Yay.
Okay. Hi, Melina.
Hi, Melina.
So, hi.
I don't get to do that very often. In Greece, perhaps that happens a little bit more because I know my name is Greek, but I am not.
It's not very often in my case either. So
okay, cool.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you about your second book actually, that you mentioned, and so the second book is more what I would say about like the internal organization, right? It's not the customer facing side. So I was going to say, I was going to ask you, what's your experience with clients? Is it easier to get them to, like talk and, get interested about the client facing side of behavioral science? Do you find that's the case, or because my bias is that I think it's a little bit harder to talk about what happens inside the organization from the behavioral economics perspective. Mm-hmm. I think it seems that maybe because of like decades of marketing and these things have made it more, I don't know, intuitive for people to I see what you're talking about. Yeah. What's your experience?
So for one, and I think because we've been communicating, on LinkedIn otherwise. And so, that, so my second book is tentatively titled What Your Employees Need and Can't Tell You. And it's about helping people to be naturally better at change. And so like a change management approach. And that pricing is coming, right? It got pushed down the line too. So what I have found is that they are different conversations with different teams and or leaders within an organization. So if I'm talking to marketing people, about marketing stuff and customer facing things, or people in customer experience maybe care more about the customer facing stuff than someone in HR or someone that is booking trainings within the organization for their teams. And so it's more about, in the same like framing piece and understanding the goals, is knowing like, okay, if this team is very interested in applying something in whatever way, I just have multiple topics that I can provide that are supportive, whether it's internal or external, and kind of gauge it based on who I'm talking to and what it is that they're trying to achieve. So I have not really had that issue yet. And I would say too, there's so much about interest in biases and how they impact us in the workplace right now that I would guess that that's going to be less of an issue, though you do have a lot of people that are trying to pretend like they know something about that to like jump on the bandwagon that I think could be causing problems for the rest of us. But to where people might get some sort of burnout or fatigue or they hired someone who said they could help them with that and they really can't. But in general, if you're addressing the problem in the right space, hopefully it wouldn't be as much of an issue. But somebody who has nothing to do with the, internal culture, then it might be a hard sell.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I see that there was a question that came in. It says, if we have time for another question, what do you people most want to know? What's the number one question? But I don't know that it meant you people. As much as like, what do people more likely ask me, or what's the number one question?
Yeah, that's what I meant. What people are most likely to ask you, and what's your number one question you get, basically?
I think that I get a lot of questions. There are multiple sides. So like some are, I'm super interested in behavioral economics. How do I start doing something like what you're doing? Right. That's a question I get. I also get questions about like writing books, starting a podcast, tips for those sorts of things. And the other is, if we're looking at like applying it, there's the like, well, what's the one concept? What's the best approach? What's the silver bullet, of which there isn't one. Sorry. But there is more of, which is why understanding the problem and having kind of a set of concepts instead of having to go off of the hundreds, which is why I picked 16 for the book, so that you know what behavior you're trying to change, what people are already doing, how you can help, test some things out. And you can have a few set things that you start with. And, similar to where Paris had asked about my favorite chapter in the book, I would say I often get asked my favorite concept. And I think framing is there's a reason it's the first one in the book. And there's a reason for it, in that it's really easy for people to grasp and to start testing with right away. You can reframe a subject line or how you share something on social media, or the color of a button, or your call to action, or, there are things that you can start doing very simply and be testing on your own right away, with, no additional budget or consequence, and see a lot of value. So, yeah.
So Melina, I have a question. I want to take you back to the literary example. Mm-hmm. And I want to ask you something. We've talked about the fact that this project that they did had a 100% success, but it had to do with money, with the likelihood of actually getting money. And 5,000 euros is a good amount, right? Mm-hmm. But have you figured out other ways of trying to implement change? Because it's not always it's not always a way to do it. If you give money to people, you can't always do that. So there are other ways that are as impactful as this one.
Yeah. So there's a chapter in the book on surprise and delight, and that is a really good way to be motivating action. And you think about what it is that you're trying to encourage someone to do, and then what's going to be likely to get that moving. So when you think about a lot of businesses and what they want, maybe it's more followers on social media, and particularly engaged followers, right? That's something that you want. And so if you put together, for everyone who leaves a rating and review and shows me a picture of it, or for all the new followers I get this week, I'm going to give away, for me, I could say like an hour strategy session call with me that's regularly valued at whatever, or like that really most people can't get one-on-one time if you're not doing a consulting project or something, right? So, or you could say you get a free copy of my book or whatever, right? You could have something smaller that you're giving away to encourage that piece there. One of the things, reciprocity helps too, of being able to give out things that are free to get something back, like an email address. We take for granted what it means for someone to give you their email address these days, because you assume people sign up for so many things, but people also get spammed a lot, and that sucks, and you don't want to be that. And so there is this moment of like, do I want to give you my email? And you want to make sure you're providing good value for them. So thinking about what specifically you are asking for and what resources you have, like what would the people that you are trying to attract, what would be of value to them, and how you can have that be a motivating factor. And if you don't have, 5,000 euro to be giving away, or in the case of, municipalities, millions, right? It can be something that still is of great value to the people that you are trying to attract, even if it's just some of your time or something like that.
Okay, thank you for your answer.
Yeah.
Final question from me, and I want to touch on the podcasting side for a bit, because there's one friend of mine in this call who's interested in podcasts, but he's never going to ask the question. I know that you were pretty much the first podcast to kind of talk about behavioral economics. What were the major challenges at the start that you faced?
Yeah. So with anything that you're going to do, and, podcast, so we often feel like we need to be everywhere doing everything at the highest possible level at all times. And it is better to do one or two things really, really well than to do 10 things half-assed, right? Like it's just not worth that. And so for me, I made the decision that a podcast was going to be like the top of my funnel and the biggest thing I was going to be doing, and that it was, the most important thing for my business, for people to understand what I did, why behavioral economics even mattered. The problem I was facing in a world where, and when I started was more, I had marketing contacts and was kind of looking at that space narrowly. That's like now one of many things I do. But that people didn't even know that this existed. And so for me to be trying to cold call a bunch of people and say, let me tell you about this amazing thing that you've never heard of, and here's why you should care about it. Oh, and hire me, right? Like that's a real uphill battle. So creating instead a podcast where I'm able to share, thoughts and show what it would be like to work with me and how I think through things, makes it so people can then discover on their own that this is good. They're very warm leads by the time they make it to me, because I'm investing so much into creating a podcast. So that being said, a podcast is a lot of work to do it well, and it takes a lot of time. This is another of those questions where I get asked, so I'll say from the beginning, I was spending a minimum of 8 hours per episode per week creating them. And that's like, I have never done my own editing, and I don't post it myself. And I have a company that helps me do the first round of the show notes. So that time is not included. And it doesn't even have the bulk of me like creating social posts and engaging on social media, like just like figuring out what I want to talk about, doing research. I have to script every episode because there's a lot of nuance in there. And then recording 8 hours. So like dedicating an entire day of my week, every single week, just to creating something that in theory doesn't bring me in any revenue. I can tell you every single thing, every dollar my business has made since the podcast, I can tie back to it. So totally worth it for me, but it's because I'm investing enough. People say, well, like, you know, but you could, like, I could just do it in an hour a week, right? Like, it doesn't have to take that long. Like, yeah, sure. Right. You can record something on your phone and just post it into the world, but it doesn't mean it's going to resonate with people and create that value you want it to create. So I had to say no to a lot of things and say, I'm not going to write a book yet. I'm not going to work on my YouTube presence. I'm not going to do I have to have one episode come out every single week of a high quality. I can never miss. And I decided to spend an entire year doing that before I could evaluate and say it worked or didn't. Thankfully, far before that year, I knew that it was working very, very well. And part of that is, like you said, I was the first person in the very blue ocean. And so people would search for behavioral economics on any sort of podcast platform around the world. And mine was the first or only thing that came up. So it made it helpful for me, where now there's more clutter there. But so knowing that there were a lot of like late nights and recording at 1 o'clock in the morning when you're doing other things that you have to do. But having that dedication to the consistency is incredibly important for something like this. And I did, pretty sure it was for episode 100. I did my top lessons from the first 100 episodes of the podcast and tips for people that want to do their own. So that is episode 100 of the Brainy Business. And for any of the episodes too, like where, you know, like framing was 16 and the literary was 75, I think you can go to thebrainybusiness.com/ the number like /75 and it'll take you to the literary, or /100, it'll take you to that other episode. There are 181 episodes now as of yesterday. So lots of back catalog to go through.
Okay, so I don't think we have any other questions. So at that point, I'd like to thank everyone for being here. Melina, thank you so much. It has been amazing. So thank you so much, everyone. And you know, buy Melina's book and keep an eye out for our future events. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks. And for anyone who wants to like connect on LinkedIn, or if you have other questions as you think, please do. And you can find me on the other socials as the Brainy Biz, and always happy to help and answer questions. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been great.
Bye, everyone. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.